Okay. By continuing to stay on this call, you are agreeing to being recorded. This is being recorded so that we can share for further training information. Welcome everybody to Creating a Kin First Culture with Rebecca Rice, our Maryland Foster Parent Ombudsman. If you're just joining, again, please make sure you sign into the chat with your name and county. If you are on with a spouse, you must be on video in order for us to award training credit to both you and your spouse. If you have any questions, you may put them in the chat or wait till the end when Becky has finished her presentation. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, you can put them in the chat, and I will try to answer them in between her presentation. So Becky, I'm gonna let you take it away and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Becky Rice, and I am the Resource Parent Ombuds at the Social Services Administration. So I work with our foster parents, our kinship families, and our adoption and guardianship families. I've been in this role for 2 years, actually 2 years this month, which is amazing. It has gone really quickly. I know. Prior to that, I spent 14 wonderful years in Washington County at the Department of Social Services and out-of-home care, and then 4 years in Frederick County, also in the foster care unit, and working directly with our resource families. You'll hear me use the word resource parent and foster parent interchangeably. It's just something that we're all still working on. But Stephanie and MRPA, I just want to thank you for allowing us to present tonight. There's some exciting information that we're going to share that benefits our kinship providers. So I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint presentation. Stephanie's going to help with the chat box, which I really appreciate. But I'm going to go through the slides pretty quickly so we can actually have an opportunity at the end for me to stop sharing my screen, and we can actually talk and I can answer questions and kind of tell you what's coming next. So kinship care. Prior to, so last month, in order for a kinship family to be licensed and receive the monthly care stipend, they would have to go through the exact same licensing process as an unrelated foster family. And that was something, that's the biggest thing that we've changed. So I'm going to back up a little bit and see if I can successfully share my screen. Okay, so welcome and introductions. The current Maryland kinship practice, benefits of placing kids with kin, the importance of partnering with kin, and overview of the federal rule, the law, the COMAR, and the policy. And that sounds really boring, but we're actually going to make it as interesting as I can and just give us kind of a brief overview, because that's what got us started with these changes. And then assessing, licensing, and supporting our kinship caregivers. And that's what I had started to jump ahead to, because I'm really excited about that, because that's what impacts our families the most. So kin first, you might be wondering, what does kin first mean? It means that a state recognizes that it is important to place kids with relatives and family by choice whenever that's possible. Research has shown that when kids are able to stay connected to their families and, live in their communities and live with their relatives or family by choice, it causes less trauma. So whenever we're able to do that, we want to do that. And that isn't a change for Maryland. We have, prioritized placing children with relatives, and family by choice whenever possible, but it hasn't always been an easy process for the relatives, and sometimes, easy for the department. And that's something that we are looking at changing. So one thing that we've been really deliberate about when we have been writing the new COMAR chapter and writing the new policy and creating the new assessment forms that support this change is our language. And we realized that there was some outdated language in our policies and in our COMAR regulations. And we've worked to change that. So instead of, when you read the policy and when you see forms, or if you're a COMAR geek like I am and you're looking at COMAR, you're going to notice a couple changes. One of those is that we don't refer to children in care as foster children anymore. We refer to them as children in care, children in out-of-home care. It's not that, foster child is a bad word, but it's stigmatizing, and it puts the child's situation before the actual child. So, they are a child who happens to be in foster care. That is their, current situation, but it's not the type of child that they are. And when you say foster child, especially to people who aren't as familiar with the system, it's stigmatizing. So we know better, we're doing better. Another one is family by choice instead of fictive kin. Fictive kin is a term that we've used, for a long time to describe important family members, but who aren't related by blood. And but when you look up the word fictive, it's fictitious, made up, make believe. And there's some situations when a family by choice may happen to have a stronger bond or relationship, than a relative by blood. So we want to make sure that we are recognizing and honoring all kin, whether they are related by blood or it's a best friend or your best neighbor or your godmother, your godfather. So family by choice instead of fictive kin. I'm gonna skip down to the bottom, the last one, monthly care stipend instead of monthly board rate. This is one of my personal favorites, because and we still have policies that say, okay, the monthly board rate or the monthly board payment. But when you think about it, kinship caregivers and foster parents do so much more than boarding children. You don't board children. We board dogs, not kids. And some people don't even board their dogs. So when we're looking at changing the culture and the culture for foster parents, the culture for kinship parents, our language is important. So again, monthly care stipend because you're caring for the kids instead of monthly board rate or monthly board payment. It's also not really a payment. It's a stipend that's going towards their care. And then kin coming to our attention, kin coming out of the woodwork. That's a term that sometimes people will use when, relatives come to our attention. And it's not something that people intend to be like a rude word, because it's just, oh, they came to us, yeah, and we were surprised because maybe we didn't know that they existed, or we hadn't, been in contact with them for a year. But when you think about it, just think about like what it sounds like, and what it might feel like, to a kinship caregiver, to a child. So it's really about them coming to our attention. All right. So you're probably like, Becky, what are you talking about tonight? What exactly is Kin First? And again, for those of you who just joined, it's about prioritizing kinship caregivers and making sure that when children come into care, we work hard to find relatives, and to place children with relatives, and family by choice whenever that is possible. And we're doing that because research has shown that when that is possible, when we're able to keep kids with relatives, they're more likely to be able to stay in their communities, in their schools, in extracurricular activities, and things like that reduce trauma. It increases the chances of siblings staying together significantly. It improves, the ability to get permanency for children, in whether that is, with adoption, guardianship, or reunification. The rates of that are higher when children are able to be placed with kinship caregivers. And then we've also seen improved mental health outcomes. And again, maintaining that connection with their family, with their culture, with their community. It does not mean that foster parents aren't doing a great job when kids are placed with them. We have some of the most amazing foster parents in Maryland, and it's important that everybody understands this is not about replacing foster parents. This is about making sure that when relatives exist and we can get kids with them, that we're doing that whenever possible. But it's not always going to be possible to place kids, in kinship care. And that's when we are still going to have, a significant need for our foster families who are able to care for our kids, to keep them safe, and to keep them connected with our family. Because even if they can't live with a family member, it doesn't mean that they can't have a connection with them and an ongoing relationship with them. And our foster parents, do a great job at helping that continue. So, kinship care across, so in Maryland, and across the country, right now, as of like a couple days ago, in Maryland, almost 28% of children who are in out of home care were placed with kinship caregivers. And again, that is, relatives and family by choice. So, about 28% of kids in Maryland placed with kinship caregivers. And that's not, that may sound like a high number, but it's actually not. And that's one of the things that Maryland is trying to increase, or the number of children who are placed with kinship caregivers. And we're going to be doing that in a number of different ways. One is by looking at, our family finding efforts. One is, figuring out ways to talk to, parents and guardians differently when kids have to come into care, so we can figure out what family members exist from the beginning. So the first, placement can hopefully be with, a relative or a family by choice. Um, Something that's really significant that we're going to talk a little bit more about in future slides is that out of our kinship caregivers, only 25% of them are licensed and receiving the monthly care stipend. So that what that means is that 75% of our kinship caregivers caring for children in out-of-home care, because in this session we're only talking about kids who are in foster care and placed with relatives. But 75% of those kinship caregivers aren't licensed and they aren't receiving the monthly care stipend. That does not mean that they haven't been approved and assessed and had the clearances and the home inspection and all that. They have. But it means that they haven't gone through the same process that resource parents have, which includes the PRIDE training, 27 hours, and that specific home study that if you're a resource parent, you went through. And part of that reason is because it's a lot. It's a lot when when you're a kinship caregiver and you already have a child placed with you, to then have to go through 27 plus hours of training and the 4-month home study. So we're looking at removing some of those barriers, and we actually have, and we're really excited about it because we've made a lot of changes. We're moving in the right direction, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. And again, that was the part that I was skipping to in the very beginning, because that's, I think, what's going to make most sense to everybody here. I do want to pause for just a moment because I believe that one of my awesome colleagues, Terry Lothar, from the Social Services Administration, I think I saw Terry join. Terry, if you are with us, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'm so sorry for my tardiness. My fault, 100%. My name's Terry. I am at SSA. I'm a program manager for Out of Home, but I also worked for 18 years between Queen Anne's County and Anne Arundel County Department of Social Services. So thanks for having Becky and I. And Becky, you tell me when you want me to jump in, and I'm so sorry for my lateness.
No worries, Terry. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate that. And if there's anything, Terry, when I'm talking that you want to chime in, please just like unmute and just have at it. I think like if we can just tag team, if there's anything that I miss or anything that you want to reiterate, I think that would be really helpful. I did explain to the group when we started that we're going to go through the slides fairly quickly, so we can leave an opportunity at the end for me to stop sharing the PowerPoint and to be able to have a discussion, with everybody and answer questions.
Sounds good.
All right. So, safety planning. This is something that we just wanted to touch on briefly because this is a significant change in Maryland as well. In the past, and in the recent past, if a child needs to come into foster care, but there is a relative who is willing to care for the children, we have not brought the children into foster care because, a relative is, we found grandma, we found aunt, we found uncle, and they're like, okay, yes, I can take them. And a lot of times we have prevented children from coming into the foster care system because we've been able to place them kind of informally with a relative. And while that is a good thing in some situations, because we know that just coming into the foster care system doesn't always solve all of the issues, but what we've learned and what other states who had this same practice have learned is that when you work really hard to prevent children from coming into foster care and require relatives to start caring for the children and maybe go and get custody on their own, it creates a situation where a lot of children and their relatives have been in like a legal limbo, because sometimes they haven't been able to get custody. So the parents still hold custody, but they haven't been, caring for the children for several years. So you've got that legal limbo. that we unintentionally have created for families, and a lack of support. So not only a lack of financial support, but also a lack of support from the department. Like different, resources, different training opportunities, sometimes home visits, sometimes help, connecting the family with different resources. So what we've realized over the last, I would say over the last year, we've really been looking at this closely and trying to figure out what is a better balance. We don't want all children coming into foster care, but when a child does have to be removed from their parents' care, we want to make sure that we are doing a better job having discussions with relatives about whether or not that child should come into care. So we're going to be talking with the birth parents or guardian. We're going to be talking with the relatives, the child, if it's age appropriate. But instead of having a practice where we are not allowing children to come into care if a relative is available, we're going to be assessing those more on a case-by-case basis, acknowledging that sometimes it is going to be in the child and family's best interest, for that child to come into foster care. So again, just looking at that more on a kind of a case-by-case basis. This will potentially increase the number of children who come into the foster care system in Maryland. And that's something that we're aware of, and that's something that's okay, as long as we are providing, those families and those children with the support and services that they need, that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. All right, so when this all started, so this is my favorite part of the presentation. When this started, so on September 28th of last year, the federal government issued a rule, which is like a strong recommendation. And the rule encouraged all states to develop a separate kinship care licensing process. So in September, federal government said to all of the states, we recognize this is an issue in a lot of states where kinship caregivers have to go through a very long, complicated process in order to get the support that they need, and we want to change that. So our leadership at the Social Services Administration was excited about that opportunity, and Terry and myself and our colleagues got to work to figure out how to make that happen. And we worked with a national team of kinship care experts, kinship care and foster care experts, who interviewed kinship caregivers and child welfare professionals from across the country, including some from Maryland, to develop a set of recommendations for things in the licensing and training process that could be removed because they're barriers and they didn't impact safety, and then things that we might need to add or look at differently. One thing that we recognized is that some states already had, not a lot, but some states had separate licensing processes for kinship caregivers, and then some, like Maryland, had to start from scratch. So we did that, but the very first step, we actually had to get a law changed. So this law that went into effect on October 1st, signed by Governor Moore, expanded the definition of a kinship caregiver. And you probably ask, why is that important? It's important because it broadened the definition so we can consider family by choice, and we can consider people who are related by tribal law or custom or cultural custom, and not just relatives who are related to a child within 5 degrees of consanguinity. Consanguinity is like the relation, so like whether it's like a fifth cousin. So the previous definition was pretty rigid, and didn't allow us to place to consider as many people kinship caregivers as we need to in order to do what is best for children. So the law modernized the kinship caregiver definition, and it expanded it. And then that is what allowed us to create a new COMAR chapter for kinship care. So I know most resource parents, and I know we have some kinship caregivers with us this evening too. Most of you have heard us talk about COMAR. COMAR is the Code of Maryland Annotated Regulations. So if you hear me say COMAR or regulations, I'm talking about the same thing. And it's the law that, we use that guides what local departments of social services have to do and what foster parents and kinship parents have to do. But the first thing we had to do was write a new COMAR chapter. And we did that with the support of, again, the national team and our leadership at the Social Services Administration. And the new COMAR chapter went into effect on December 12th. And it outlines the requirements for kinship caregivers moving forward, which are more flexible than they had been in the past. One thing that we're super, super excited about is that while we were writing this new COMAR chapter for kinship care licensing, we realized how many barriers there were in the resource home licensing chapter. And we were able to make a lot of positive changes in the resource home chapter as well. So for those of you who aren't kinship caregivers, but you're resource parents, in January, we're going to host another MRPA Presents session with Stephanie. And that is going to be talking about the changes to the requirements for resource homes. And I think you're going to be really excited about that as well, because we were able to remove things such as barriers against bunk beds. When we were looking at, when we were drafting the COMAR regulations for kinship care, bunk beds is something that they've been prohibited for children in out-of-home care in Maryland for as long as I've been with the state, which has been 19 years. So at least 19 years. And we recognized that sometimes allowing bunk beds is going to make or break whether a child can stay with a relative or whether siblings can stay together. And Maryland was one of the last states that had a ban on bunk beds for children in foster care. So children in foster care are now allowed, because again, the regulations for kinship care and resource homes went into effect on the 12th of this month. So children who are in foster care can now sleep in bunk beds. That is huge. That doesn't mean that every child who's in foster care is going to be safe in a bunk bed, but it means when it's safe and appropriate, we're allowed to do that. And kinship caregivers and foster parents and the local department can make those decisions. So just having that flexibility is huge. And we were able to extend that into the resource home COMAR chapter. So whether you're a child who is with a kinship caregiver or with a foster family, and it's safe and appropriate, you're going to be able to sleep in a bunk bed if that is what the family has. So that is just one example of, I think, the impact that this will have. It also provides more normalcy to children in care and to the caregivers, when you're allowed to have, more flexibility with things like that. So the COMAR chapter was the first, and then the policy. So the policy was released, meaning it went into effect on Monday, so December 16th. And the policy for kinship care licensing is really, really specific. There's a lot of information in there, and it really outlines everything that if you're a kinship caregiver, or you're a worker working with a kinship caregiver, you would want to be aware of. And then we had to create forms that were going to support this work, because before the regulations and the new policy went into effect, like I mentioned earlier, if you were a kinship caregiver and you wanted to receive the monthly care stipend, you had to go through the same training program and the same home study process, which takes around 4 months. So we had to create forms that could be used to assess and license families that were different from the home study template, that we had been using. So I'm going to get into a little bit of that. So you're probably like, okay, Becky, so you're not doing the safe home study template, and you're not having, kinship caregivers be required to go through the training. What are you requiring? And we're still requiring a home study. It is still a home study. It's just a different home study. It's one that is truly tailored to kin. There are 3 sections to it. It's a comprehensive, thorough. It's about 19 pages long, but it is a tool that the social worker will come out. They'll meet with a kinship caregiver in their home, and the social worker will complete the form with the kinship caregiver. It gathers information, about the kinship caregiver, about other household members, their health, mental health, financial stability, pets that are in the home, that type of thing, because it's about making sure that the home is safe, but also making sure that the child's well-being, that we're looking at not just safety, but we're looking at well-being. So we're looking at the relationship, that the kinship caregiver has with the child, the relationship the kinship caregiver has with a parent. Just because it's a rocky relationship doesn't mean that it would be an unsafe environment, but it means that we might be able to put supports in that could help, repair a relationship if it was a stressful situation. And then the last section is the home health and fire safety assessment. So I'm not going to get into that to these sections a lot, but just wanted to share that because it is still a comprehensive assessment, but it's something that can be done at one home visit versus taking 4 months to complete. And that is huge because what that means is we're going to be able to place children with kinship caregivers, do this assessment, and if it's safe and appropriate, we will be able to keep the child there and issue the monthly care stipend from the date that children are placed with that kinship caregiver. Versus, a child comes into care and the kinship caregiver has to go through training, and training may not be offered for 3 months, and then it can take a year, sometimes longer, for somebody to be licensed. And this new process, because it's streamlined, allows us to truly license a family, in a couple days. And that not only helps the family because then they can start receiving the monthly care stipend, but they can also be invited to support groups. And we're going to do a better job of making sure that we, educate them about the MRPA meetings and just all of these different opportunities. So moving forward, all of our kinship caregivers will be licensed, and it's possible because it's a much less cumbersome process. I mentioned that training will not be required for kinship caregivers. Just because it's not going to be required in order for a child to be placed or for the family to be licensed, it doesn't mean that training is not important. We know that children who are in foster care have experienced a lot of things, and that sometimes they have special needs, because of that. So making sure that the department is still providing training opportunities and inviting kinship caregivers to trainings and to support groups, that's going to be critical. So we're not saying that training is not important. We're not saying that we're not going to be like asking kinship caregivers to join trainings when we think it would be helpful. We're just saying that it's not going to be a requirement in order for a kinship caregiver to start being licensed and receive that monthly care stipend, because that's one of the things that we recognized was impacting the support that we were able to provide to our kin. And that's one of the reasons why 75% of our kinship caregivers aren't licensed. And then the other part is the kinship caregiver agreement. The title of this form is actually the resource parent and kinship caregiver agreement. If you're a licensed family, it's something that you have signed. The current one is called the resource parent agreement. So we added the word kinship caregiver because we want to make sure that it's clear that this is for everybody. But we took, with this document, we took several forms and combined them into one comprehensive document that will provide kinship caregivers and resource parents with the rights and responsibilities, the things that they need to be aware of, related to everything from like legal custody to out-of-state travel to babysitting and childcare. We took, again, a lot of forms, tried to condense them into one. And it will also help with consistency across the state, because we realized that depending on which jurisdiction families were licensed in, some local departments had, created different forms to try to make sure that they were providing like all of the information, but then other departments may not have been aware that this awesome form existed. So we really tried to create this tool to be helpful for kinship caregivers and resource parents to make sure that they are aware of the most important things from the very beginning. And both of these things, the assessment and the agreement, have to be, completed at the beginning, when a family is licensed. And then the kinship caregiver agreement is going to be reviewed and re-signed annually, at the annual reconsideration or the annual review. Terry, a minute ago, I think I saw your hand. Did you want to chime in?
I did a little clap for combining all the forms into one.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was huge, because one of the things that we've really tried to do is to take the feedback from resource parents and kinship caregivers into account when we've been making these changes. So we worked with the local department staff, but we also got feedback from kinship caregivers and resource parents on these forms. And that was one of them, is that there were just too many forms. So even though this is a longer document now, the agreement, it's a much better document. And we think that it will be helpful. And when you see it for the first time, or if you've seen it already, and you have feedback, send it to us. Let us know what questions you have. Let us know what you think could be better. The more we can collaborate and discuss things, the better our practice is going to be. All right. So the monthly care
I can
stipend.
step in if you want me to.
Yeah, go for it. Thanks, Terry.
Hi, everyone. So the monthly care stipend for our newly licensed kinship care providers will start the date of placement. So if someone gets a placement of their niece or nephew tonight, the payment will begin tonight. And then, as Becky was saying, the worker will have the 5 days to complete the assessment. But we want to show that even while we're working through the licensing process, you'll get paid from the very first night with the monthly care stipend. Did I get it right, Becky?
You got it.
Have you talked about language before I came on? About
Yes, yes.
language, so I'm terrible about the monthly care stipend. I'll comes out of my mouth for 20 years as a board rate, a monthly board rate. So when I get it right and say monthly care stipend, it's a little celebration for Becky and I.
That was good, Terry. You did a good job.
So our kinship caregivers are eligible to receive the same amount as our resource parents do for the monthly care stipend. They'll be able to receive the regular rate or the intermediate rate. So if their family, their kin come to their house and they have a higher level of need and they qualify for the intermediate rate, then they could also get that rate. We also have a third rate that's eligible for resource parents and kinship caregivers, and that's the difficulty of care stipend. So if you have a resource or a child in your home or a kin in your home, and they are would typically probably be in a therapeutic foster home, but they're with you, we can look to see if they meet the needs of a difficulty or care stipend, which is $200 extra a month on top of the intermediate rate. So our kinship caregivers would be eligible for the exact same amounts that our current resource parents are able to get. It's the regular rate, the intermediate rate, and the intermediate rate with difficulty of care. And I don't mind, keep going.
Hey, go for it. You know, I'll chime in on this one, but take it away.
So supporting our kin families, we typically, like Becky said, 75% of our kin families right now are not licensed. So once we have more families licensed, we'll have many more caregivers between our resource parents and our kinship families. So we want to support our kin families the same way that we offer support to our resource parents. The first thing is by receiving the monthly care stipend. They will also receive a kinship / resource home worker, where everybody, if you're a resource parent, you have your resource parent worker. And I see Robin on here. So she's like a resource parent worker for her county that she works in. This may vary in each jurisdiction. So it may be a resource family worker that you get. It might also be someone called a kinship family worker, but they're going to be the ones that are working on licensing your home and maintaining the home, looking at your annual review, different things that you'll need to have to maintain your license. That worker will be there to support you. We can also offer respite care for our kinship caregivers. And we use an example that if, just say I were to get licensed for my niece, I could provide, or one of my family members could provide respite for her, and she could come to a resource parent's house for respite, but I wouldn't be able to provide respite for other children in out-of-home care because I was only licensed for my niece. So they would have respite care. They would be eligible to get reimbursed for childcare mileage. They would have support from our social services ombuds, which is Becky. They would be eligible to participate in Maryland Resource Parent Association and our local resource parent associations. Becky, you can chime in whatever, but I'll keep going and then let you talk too if you want. So
that'd be great.
Our kinship families would have access to all the support groups that our resource parents are, that they have access to training opportunities, any local sponsored event that a local DSS will have, and it might be Resource Parent Association, it might be a Halloween celebration, a winter party, Christmas party, whatever. Many times our kinship families hadn't been invited to that because they weren't licensed, but now they'll also be able to join our resource parent appreciation events, and lastly have access to our community partners. Two of the ones we have listed, one is Blue Ribbon Project, which is in Anne Arundel County, but it's for the whole state of Maryland. And then Foster the Family, which is mostly for the metro area of Maryland. Becky, kick it off.
Thanks, Terry.
Becky,
Stephanie, I see a question from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. So I apologize in the beginning. I didn't introduce myself. So Stephanie Lay, I am the executive director of the MRPA. We are working very hard to get local associations and even making sure at a state level we are including. It's not just foster care. We are foster, adoptive, kinship, guardianship. If you came into a child through the state, through originally foster care, we want to embrace you. We want to offer you training. If we go to events, if you did a child in guardianship or kinship several years ago, you are still eligible to attend our trainings, to come to any local county event. We're trying very hard to make sure you are not excluded, and to make sure that we're using the right terms to include everybody. So I know at the MRPA level, whenever we say resource parent, that means adoptive, kinship, guardianship, and foster. So anything that we offer, just know that you are included and welcome to join.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
And that's one of the things that I've really, respected about MRPA for years is the support that they are willing and able to provide to kinship caregivers as well as resource parents. Just because it's called the Maryland Resource Parent Association, like Stephanie said, resource parent, is that umbrella term that includes kinship caregivers. The biggest thing I would just say, to piggyback on what Terry and Stephanie shared, is that we just want to make sure that all kinship caregivers have the same support, that our resource families have. And in the past, when, the 75% of our kinship caregivers who were caring for the kids doing the same amount of work, dealing with the same level of stress, but not receiving that's the stipend and not receiving that extra, like home worker, that's what we want to change. So the goals of, of Maryland becoming a kin first state are to increase the number of children that are placed with relatives when they have to come into foster care, and to better support those relatives from the very beginning, because it's all about, trying to meet the needs of the children in the best way that we can. And we have to do that as a team. This
Becky,
is
I'm sorry, I had a question. I just wanted to adjust that. It said you stated you give an extra 200 a month. How high a level of the child needs have to be? I don't know if you can see the question in the chat there.
I can't, so I appreciate you reading
I
it.
did see it. Yeah, thank you. So there are certain criteria that get to that point. So there's a COMAR criteria that makes a child eligible for the intermediate rate. And then there's also addition to that for the monthly, for the difficulty of care. So if you have a child that does have really high needs, talk to your worker and they can look at what the qualifiers are to see if you qualify for that. And then they would work with you to put in a request to Social Services Administration.
Thanks, Terry. And if it's something like when you talk to your worker, because that's the first step, is asking them, like, say, hey, I was in a training and I heard that in certain situations, some children, in foster care may qualify for a higher rate because they have a much higher level of need. If the worker doesn't know, or they aren't familiar with that, you're welcome to connect them with me as the ombuds, or you're welcome to reach out to me if you want me to help support you around that. Because it is something that sometimes true, people aren't aware of it. Sometimes, foster parents, kinship caregivers aren't aware of it. Sometimes, new staff may not be aware of it. So it really is about, that's why attending trainings like this and talking to other people and other, foster and kinship parents is so important. Because there is truly so much involved. There's so many rules and regulations, and also supports and training opportunities sometimes that like not everybody's aware of. So again, the more opportunities like this that you take to kind of educate yourself and to network with other people, the better. But yeah, so either, so reach out to your worker. If they have questions or they're unsure or you're not comfortable reaching out to them, reach out to me. I can share with you, and kind of answer some questions and try to guide you through, through that process. All right, I am going to stop sharing my screen. All right, I can see everybody again. Let's do a time check. We are at 7:42, so we have about 18 minutes left. Would love to open it up to any questions or comments or concerns that anybody may have. And again, I know that we have some licensed resource parents with us. I know we have some licensed kinship caregivers. I know we also, I don't know if any are with us this evening, but we also have some foster parents and kinship caregivers who are also like DSS, like employees, but they are also fostering children. So it really is, we've got quite a community, but would just love to be able to open this up. See, yes, training is important. We agree. Training is important. Thank you for that.
I have a
And again,
question. Can I ask a question?
please.
So you were talking about the intermediate rate. Hi, my name is Joyce Taylor. I'm with Prince George's County
Hi,
Resource
Joyce.
Parent. Resource Parent. I apologize for being a little bit late. So do you have to be this confusion in my understanding? I'm not sure if the worker understands or knows, but do you have to be a therapeutic licensed parent to get the intermediate rate, or can you just be or
No,
normal?
the intermediate rate is it's something that is for our DSS licensed foster families, and it's based on the actual child, not the foster family. So,
Okay. That's
yeah,
good to
so
know.
the,
I thought that was the answer because I've had several children in my home that were um, that were have the issues or needed additional support, I should say, and they came from therapeutic homes. And I'm not a therapeutic parent. I recently found out more about this. I'm so glad I'm in this training so I can reference it. But I recently found out about this week. So I do want to take the therapeutic training. However, you're telling me now I don't even have to do that. If the child meets the needs or
correct.
the
Yes. So,
qualifications, then that they don't tell you that. So that's why this training is important. And I'm going to drop your
absolutely.
name and tell them you said so.
So yeah. Well, it's a little bit confusing. So I just want to
It's
clarify.
very confusing.
You're welcome. You're welcome to share my name. I just want to make sure we're clear about what we're sharing. So it sounds like the children who you are fostering now were previously fostered by a treatment foster family.
Yes.
Treatment foster families are licensed in a different way and receive a different stipend than our DSS families. So
Yes.
that's very different. They have to go through different training. They receive a higher stipend.
Right.
So that's, yeah, just want to make sure that's like two separate
Yeah, I'm
things.
clear. I'm clear on the answer. I thank you. I appreciate your clarification.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing I just want to acknowledge is in the past, in my experience at least, we have not always talked about the financial implications of fostering enough because people are like, oh, I'm uncomfortable talking about like money. And I think that's something that we can change because we know that being a foster parent, kinship parent is not cheap. So the very least we can do is to acknowledge that and to talk about different options that may exist. It doesn't mean it's going to be possible for every child or every family. But that's one thing I bring up, the financial part in trainings because I want to try to normalize that, not because I want to make it about money. For a long time, foster parents had a bad reputation for, people foster, because of the money. That is not what we're talking about here. But I just want to acknowledge that it is okay to ask questions. It is okay if you haven't been reimbursed for childcare for 6 months, or if you haven't received the monthly care stipend for 4 months. It's okay to ask about that. And a lot of times people come to me because, they haven't been comfortable asking. So again, make it clear that you're not fostering, it's not about the money, but it's about making sure that you have what you need to be able to support the kids. So, Joyce, I just appreciate you being comfortable asking that, and just wanted to throw that out there.
I did put in the chat Comar, but I actually put the wrong page. So I'm going to update it and put it on there to what can qualify a youth to get the intermediate rates. There are some things they have to do. And just remember too, that a therapeutic foster home is meant as a step that would eventually step down to a regular resource home or an intermediate rate home. So that's supposed to be short-term treatment foster care. But I'll put in the right Comar, sorry, in the chat now.
Thanks, Terry.
And Becky, I just want to say something. Somebody had put in, it's okay, I've spent much more than my stipend. Let's be honest. You as a foster parent, kinship, guardianship parent, you've heard the good and the bad, but the thing you hear the most is you do it for the money. When I respond to people, I say, if you think it's so much money, why don't you try to be a foster parent? That's how I try to recruit people.
Yes.
If you are an actual foster parent, you know that 95% of the time you are spending more of your stipend on that child, or sorry, you're spending more than what their monthly stipend is. Let's be honest.
Yes.
And nobody wants to say that, but we are all thinking that. So let's kind of normalize that I personally, in my job, I take that as an opportunity to recruit and say, if you think it's a money-making thing, because I hear the negative all the time. Oh, you had 4 kids, you're making bank. Do you know how much 4 teens cost to feed? More than what my stipend is. But hey, hey, give it a try. Let's get you signed up for classes, that type of thing. So let's normalize that. It's okay to tell people, yes, we do get a stipend. We are doing this out of, because we want to help these children. Yes, we get a stipend, but we all know it does not cover it. It's okay to talk about it. It's not taboo.
Yes, definitely. I appreciate you saying that. I really do. And that brings me back to the 75% of our kinship caregivers in Maryland are not even receiving the stipend at all.
Yep.
But they're doing the same work, and they're so like that's significant. And that's one of the reasons that we needed to change our practice is so we can support people equally and support people better. So yeah, so very, very significant. And you're probably wondering, well, what about, those 75, percent of, the kinship caregivers who aren't licensed? Like, how are we going to get them licensed? And every Department of Social Services is currently working on that. They are scheduling home visits with all of the kinship caregivers who have kids in their home, but haven't been licensed and therefore aren't receiving the stipend. And they're going out with these new assessment forms, with the new agreement. They're meeting with them, and they are updating that, and then they're going to be able to come back to the department, to the office, and create what they need to do in the system so they can all be licensed. So we're working quickly to do that. And again, that's not only going to benefit the kinship caregivers, but it's going to benefit the kids. And hopefully, over time, we're going to see the positive impact of this. It also doesn't mean that, everything is going to be perfect. So whenever, new policies and new practices, go into effect, there are things that you have to work out. There may be kinks. There may be like an assessment question that you're like, oh, that is not doing what it needs to do. We need to look at that differently. So I would just, encourage people to be open to the change, be excited about it if you can, but also be realistic. Big changes, and this is a big change, take time to get to a point where it's like working the way that it's supposed to, and you're seeing the benefits. So just because right now, we're still working things out, there might be unintended consequences. We have tried preparing for everything, by the way, but we know that sometimes, when you make a positive change, something may happen that you're not prepared for, and then you have to pivot and figure out how to address that in policy and practice. And we may need to do that. And that's okay, because we're still moving in the right direction of supporting all of our caregivers of children in out-of-home care in Maryland better.
Becky, before we get to the question in chat, Jamila Crooks has her hand up, so I'd like to acknowledge her.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you very much. I want to say, 1, I apologize for being late. 2, I have found my people.
Aw, who are your people, Jamila?
So for myself, the journey was such that there were some children that we fell in love with that my sister and brother were fostering. There was disruption, they were moved, etc., and then they needed help. And we did not know we could help. My husband and I absolutely would help, but we didn't know that we could. And under the circumstances, because their family could not help, the foster parents they were with were like, why don't you reach out to them? Reach out to them. They love them. They've been with them the last 5 years. Reach out to them. And my husband and I absolutely accept it. And I will say that my husband and I, 3 months in, looked at each other like we have bit off more than we can handle. And to hear people saying, like the lady said, we're spending way more than whatever a stipend could be. I have found my people. And I would like to note, I don't know if it was mentioned already, it is very different if you have a home without children and you bring in children than when you already have. So I already have 2. So when my children already have extracurricular activities, we're team emotional health. So I by no means am treating anybody different. So then the other 2 need to be in extracurricular activities. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It has caused us complete financial wreckage. It has been tough. And then to hear you even acknowledge that we're getting reimbursed 6 months later, we are beyond stressed. We would not make a different decision, but I will say I ceased suggesting that people adopt or people foster, etc. Because I'm like, we had no clue what this has done. Like, it has tore our credit up, everything. It has been really and truthfully rough. So to hear that help is coming, I am so grateful for the others, for those, the newer people that are coming in that will have a better experience. I'm extremely grateful to hear that. And I'm grateful
Yes.
to know that there is hope. We're getting some help now, but we
Okay.
very much look for it. And the children, I've just taught the children that we're in a spending freeze. So they're learning about budgeting,
Oh, gotcha.
right?
Yes.
They've learned about, there's some positives out of it, but they've learned about budgeting. Now, no one is starving, no one is going without, but we're
Yes.
nowhere near where we were before. Does that make sense?
It does, and I really, really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's important for everybody to hear. That's important for Terry and I to hear because we're involved in helping to change the practice at the state level. So that's like feedback that we can take back to our leadership about how impactful this really is.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
but
It's,
yeah,
it's significant because
absolutely.
we told them from the beginning, we can't afford 4 children. And to your point, 2 of them are teenage boys whose physiques have completely changed, and they're eating us out of a house of a home. Bless their hearts.
I
And
can
they're
only
athletes.
I
Yeah,
can only imagine. I can only imagine.
so
And just
yes.
one plug I want to share is for anybody, whether it's Jamila or anybody else, if there are things that you're struggling with the local department or with the court system, or if you just need to vent about like a policy or a practice that you think is whack, you can reach out to me and we can discuss it. If it's not something that we can change, I'll be honest and I'll be like, that
I
is actually
appreciate
like a
that.
federal law. Like, we can't change that, but maybe we could explain it differently, or maybe we could put this support in. I like to think that even if we can't change something, we can come up with a way to make it more manageable. So as you know, my role as the ombuds is to advocate for, but to also help people navigate the system, to help rise, issues, to help bring issues, raise issues to the leadership at the local DSS if it's something that, you've tried addressing and you haven't gotten anywhere. So please reach out to me if there are things that I can do to assist you, or if you have questions, or again, just need to process with somebody who is in a neutral position, who is not working like I work with, all of the local departments. I don't work.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. I appreciate that. I admit I've added so many emails to the emails trying to get help, and it's got some people's attention. So it's been
Good.
the team has been great. It's just they just didn't have an answer, and I'm just extremely happy to hear that there is an answer.
Got it.
So thank you very much. But I will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're most welcome. Thank you again. Thank you again for sharing.
Yep. Thank you for sharing. I put it in the chat too. Thank you for sharing. And I will tell you, Becky's your person. Like, if you want to reach out to Becky, just to even have her hear you. We can also help sometimes with other like creative ways of helping you too. So please reach out to Becky.
And Jamila,
Thank you.
if you haven't already, I'm not sure how you learned about this training, but we have the Maryland Resource Parent Association Facebook page and website. Please join those. Join our, if you join on the website, you can get weekly updates. My phone number, email is all over the place everywhere. I get calls daily, text daily. If you need to vent, Becky is great about helping out, but if there's something that maybe you're not comfortable reaching out at a state level and want to talk to another, I'm a foster, I'm adoptive, I'm a guardianship parent, I can help depending on your county. I can put you in contact with your local foster parent association. So there are so many resources for you to be able to reach out to. So yeah, let any one of us know if there's something we can help with.
I appreciate that. I really do. My sister and brother passed this to me. And then to that point, me knowing I was taking on these children and I knew their backgrounds were very different, I volunteered to take the resource parenting training that my sister and brother take. Like, they're official foster parents, right? Licensed foster parents. I volunteered to take those classes to get a clue or some insight into what these 2 children may have gone through. So I'm just ecstatic to hear about all of this. I really am. Thank you very, very much for that. I have a copy of the information and I'll be reaching out. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome. And I think just in closing, what one thing I wanted to say is that over the years, literally the 19 years I've been working, with our foster and kinship parents, the information and the feedback that has been shared with me is what allowed us to make some of the changes, like in policy and COMAR. Because when I hear from people, they're like, "Hey, this is working, this isn't working." Terry and Jillian and I and people at our state office are able to have conversations around it. And say like, okay, this is something that, they're, foster families are dealing with in like 3 jurisdictions, and it's not like intended to be that way. Like, is there something that we need to be more clear in policy? So it just goes back to like the more opportunities that we all engage in, for discussions like this, the better. Because it really does allow us to change practice. And sometimes it may not allow us to change practice, for like 10 years, but when it happens, it's huge. And again, just what the last plug, in January, the MRPA Presents is going to be focusing on the resource home changes. So like the licensing, the updates and the changes and the barriers we've been able to remove, and things that we've been able to make more clear, forms that we've been able to make better. So I just want to, our resource parents, our foster parents, parents who are unrelated to the children that they are fostering are critical, are part of this. And I just want to make it clear that this is not about replacing our foster families. This is about just making sure that we are supporting all families, keeping children with kin, whenever possible, and then supporting everybody. And we know that that is a work in progress, but we appreciate you being part of this team.
Yes. It is just about 8 o'clock. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending the Creating a Kin First Culture with Becky and Terry. I'm getting ready to stop the recording. Before you log off, please make sure that you put your name and county of residence if you'd like to receive training credit. And if you attended this, I can have Becky send a copy of her slideshow. Is that okay, Becky?
Yep.
In a couple days, probably early next week, I will send out, we'll get your certificates with a copy of the slideshow. If you have any specific questions, you can always reach out to myself, Stephanie Lang. It's slang@mrpa.org. Becky's email address is always almost just as prevalent as mine. If
I'm
you
going
have
to put it in the chat right now.
Yes, all right, she'll put it in the chat for you. And if we don't hear or see from you guys, I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday. And thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.